Our special guest today is Reverend Dr. Ann Muir. She is a retired UCC minister who served congregations in California from 1985 until 2018. She is a member of Kairos Milwaukee UCC and serves as the chair on the Central Pacific Conference Wider Church Ministries Committee. Ann was recently a delegate to an international faith delegation to the Philippines, tasked with documenting human rights violations. She's also been active in organizations supporting human rights and civil rights throughout her career and now in her retirement. Ann lives in Milwaukee with her daughter, son-in-law, and young granddaughter. Ann, would you please come on up and have a conversation with me? Now, as I can be a little bit wordy and go on tangents, I'm putting a timer on, just out of respect for everybody's time. So if you hear this, I just put it for 5 minutes. That's not the right one. All right, there we go. I just don't want anybody feeling like they're held captive to Giuseppe asking question after question, and then we go on for an hour and a half. Yeah. But we would enjoy it, right?
Yes, we would have a good time.
Right. So, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for having this conversation. I want to talk about our two passages real quick. First of all, I'm a big fan of A Christmas Carol. There's a lot of Christmas stories that I just get sick of. Whatever is on Hallmark, I just, no, I don't want it. A lot of things that we just play on loop this time of year. But A Christmas Carol, in particular, the best of all the Christmas carols, A Muppet's Christmas Carol, that has my heart. And this passage from Luke 1, Mary's Magnificat, I also feel like it's just not Advent if we don't talk about Mary in some respects. And I see these two stories intersecting. If you were to ask, what does it look like for Mary's prayer to be fulfilled? The Sunday school Bible answer would be, well, it's Jesus. And that's true to an extent, right? But I think it looks like Scrooge. Scrooge having a reckoning and repenting, So for those of you who have no idea what A Christmas Carol is, I want to sum it up real quick. You have this cruel figure named Ebenezer Scrooge. Now, in A Muppet's Christmas Carol, he gets sang in, he gets introduced via song. And I was watching it with Brio 2 days ago, and Brio said, wow, it's really mean that everybody's singing such horrible things about him as he walks by. I'd never thought about that before. That's true. They are being kind of mean to, okay. Musicals. I've never had to explain a musical before, So our writer and the Muppets, they want us to know Scrooge is notoriously self-invested. He cares about himself. He cares about his money. He cares about keeping on to what he thinks is his, even at the expense of others. And then he is confronted by the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come. So essentially, you have Scrooge confronted by the past, by the now, and by the future. And after this reckoning, he goes from being completely self-invested to now invested in others, invested in his community, invested in Tiny Tim, who we know otherwise is going to die. And I find hope from this kind of story because I've known of a few Scrooges, and there's some areas I've been a Scrooge, and I've needed to be confronted by the past and the present and the future. So anyway, that's my take, and that's why I thought this would be good for our weekly theme of peace, because what I think we see happen in A Christmas Carol, by the time it's over, is at least one person at peace with the world around him. He spends all of his life in discordance with it, and then he's pursuing healing and reconciliation and wholeness with the world around him. So before we move on to some of my questions about your efforts and our conference, do you have any thoughts you want to share about Mary's Magnificat or A Christmas Carol?
This last week, anticipating today, I found a book. It popped up. It says 5-1. Oh.
Yeah.
There I am.
It has a temperamental tale. Yeah.
There
we are.
I'll hold it quickly. So in anticipation of today, this book popped into my Kindle, and it's called Mr. Dickens' Christmas Carol, and it's written by someone called Savannah Silva or something like that. And it's her take. It's wonderfully written. I just bring it up because it's her take on what Charles Dickens, what was happening in his, it's fictional, of course, what was happening in his life that caused him to have the inspiration for Scrooge. And it's a fabulous little book. You can read it in, a day. And I encourage anyone, because it just amplifies what you just said about what the story's about. And it's a wonderful way to think about how the metanoia, the change in someone's heart, how it comes about, and how, whether yet not that we necessarily believe in ghosts, but definitely, I think definitely we believe that the Spirit moves our hearts.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it's a wonderful story. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
So one of the things that I see happening in this story that's relevant for us is this confrontation, this reckoning that's happening with Scrooge. Where do you see such reckoning happening around you or in the world today?
Well, I'm going to give an example that is part of my life work, goodness sakes, 30 years ago, when I was 2,
Of course. Yeah.
Anyway, I was serving the church in Eureka, California, in Humboldt County, and I was doing my Doctor of Ministry with Walter Wink. I don't know if you know his work, but Walter Wink, who has since passed, he was adamant that you get to the core of healing by going to the core of the story and find the wound in the core of the story, and you speak to that wound, and you heal, and that's how you heal the wound, and that's exactly what I think Scrooge is about. And so in Humboldt County in 1860, there was a massacre of the Wiyot Nation. There's anywhere from 300 to 500 people. Men, women, and children were killed in the couple hours during the night. And it's not an Indian war that's part of our history, because all of those that we know so well, those massacres, were done by the Army. They were official actions. This action in Eureka was done by the townspeople. The men in the town who decided they needed to get rid of the indigenous people who were taking up valuable space, and they took it upon themselves to kill, as I said, between 300 and 500. The numbers are varies in one night. So, I guess maybe there we go. What happened is that from 1860 to 1992, and then remember what 1992 was all about?
I was a very small kid.
Yeah, but even a little bit of history. It's the Columbus quincentennial celebration. And all around the states, and even in Humboldt County, there were huge things celebrating Columbus discovering the world. And what I brought to that, along with members of the Wiyot people now, and one person of the Historical Society, was the history of the massacre, which people did not know. The people who lived in that town did not know about that massacre. And as I talked about it, the mayor of the town said to me, "Now, Ann, just don't think you can make us feel guilty." But we brought the story out. We had the most magnificent spiritual honoring on the night of the anniversary of the massacre. It was only 3 or 4 of us on a boat. It was a magical moment for me. But what happened between then and now, what was happening in Eureka at that time is terrible violence between the timber companies and the environmentalists. So that was the point. There was this huge conflict going on. It was terrible. People were being, cars were being bombed. Environmentalists were killed when their car was bombed. We can't imagine that happen. I don't know why I keep losing this. There we go. But anyway, in just bringing that story out, not just that time, but again, every year, even now on the anniversary night, they have a memorial service on the space. About 5 years ago, Eureka in Humboldt County was one of the first places that granted a big land back. They gave a big piece of land back to the people that are the Wiyots there now. Whereas in 1990, people thought, oh, there are no Wiyots. We don't know what happened to them. They just used to be here, but they're not here. We changed the whole character of the thing by bringing the story out, but not just talking about it, but bringing it out full of the Spirit. Yeah. So it works. That was a little tiny example, and I was so thrilled. I've been gone for a long time when one of the journalists who I worked with and sent me an email when the night that the county commissioners voted to do the land back, and she says, Ann, this is because of you. Thank you, because I didn't even know it was up for discussion. Not that I want to take the credit, but I do take the credit for understanding the dynamics of how you bring peace about, how you bring the change in Scrooge's heart. So that's my example.
I'm appreciative. Thank you. So one of my frustrations is that we hear of problems in the world, and we don't often hear of any kind of even small resolution. And I'm aware this doesn't undo the massacre. But it is a step towards healing. It's a step towards wholeness for the descendants who exist today and the people who live in Humboldt County. We have to have a reckoning sometimes.
It changed the whole atmosphere of the way people talk to each other politically in Humboldt County.
It reminds me of the South African Truth and Reconciliation movement.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if we actually had such a thing in the U.S.?
Well, we're getting there, and some of us are doing very concrete things to help us get there. It may not happen in my lifetime, because I have to admit my life is not as long as it was in front of me than it was in 1990.
You're only 32. I don't know what you're talking about.
But it can happen, and it didn't happen overnight in South Africa. And in fact, if anyone is interested in Walter Wink's work, his work came out of his work in South Africa. He was very invested in South Africa.
Yeah, thank you. I have so many questions, but I'm going to try to focus on these. Sometimes I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I want to give up on people. I put sometimes we want to give up on people, but I can't speak for all of you. Sometimes I want to give up on people, but change does happen. How do you think change happens? I know there's many different ways, but what are some of the ways that you've seen?
Change happens by stories being told. That's all there is to it, you know. And someone said that if we want to bring compassion to the world, we have to tell the stories. And so that's what we have to do. Whether it's a family event, you know, something in a church community, a family community, or whatever, or in a nation or in the world, we have to tell the stories to bring about the peace.
Yeah.
And the stories are upsetting to people. I tell you, I'm a historian. That's what besides my credentials to be a pastor, my education is in history and in philosophy. And, with Palestine, we'll go right there. Palestine is a huge pain, a huge thing. I even will start tearing up thinking about it.
Yeah.
But many people do not know the history of Palestine. Say, we might think we know the history of Palestine because we read the Bible. Wrong answer.
I mean, we're only missing the last 2,000 years.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And what's on there is very clear, you know.
Well, so if you go back, you only have to go back about 200 years to really understand what's happening now. And when you start talking about that, and I talk about it a lot, people get really angry with me. Yeah. That's, because we don't want to hear the truth of the background. I also work, as you know, last time I was here, I talked about my work with the Philippines. In the Philippines, the violence against people is intense. It's not a story we hear or know. And now with Palestine just blowing up, it's been lost along with others. But the thing is that, I might make some of you angry when I say this. I'm aware. The core of the historical conflict comes from imperial colonialization. We are the colonizers. Some people say, well, we were the colonies. No, the colonies were the colonizers taking over the indigenous people's space.
Yeah.
Just some people get that kind of confused. But the thing that I want to say is I think because of this dynamic that I've been talking about, the church, and I say our church, all churches, but for us, the United Church of Christ has an absolute responsibility to speak to the core of the issues, whether it's Palestine or the Philippines or the indigenous peoples of the Americas or the black people that were brought here as descendants of the slaves. Why is it our responsibility? Because the church, and the Congregational Church was really, really good at this. We were great missionaries. We were fabulous missionaries. And you know what the church was the primary tool of the colonizers to subject and enculturate the indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
That job, I get the goosebumps even saying it now, that job was the job of our heritage. And we did it really, really well. And we were well compensated for it by land, by wealth, by political and social power. And you know what? We may be, depending on where in the world you are, anywhere from 2 to 100 years off of that. But we might say, well, we we don't think that way anymore, and we're fighting for people's rights and stuff, but we don't want to really struggle to reckon with our own responsibilities. And when we truly reckon with our own responsibilities, we understand that we have to give up. We have to give up our power. We have to give up the wealth, that our wealth as of the church. We have wealth that belongs to the people, to the whole people, and we hold it for ourselves. That was not something that any of us did anything to have. That came from our heritage, our ancestors in the church, and that essential beginning came from that colonizing success. So this is why it's a great gift to us. It's a great gift to us because we have the responsibility to make a change. We have the responsibility means that we have the ability to respond. We have an ability to respond to change this energy of violence that's happening in Palestine, to change the energy of violence that happens in the United States, the racial violence that happens here, to change the energy against the immigrants, to change the energy in the Philippines, because it's all the same energy. It's all the same energy, and we are uniquely empowered to bring about the change by how we enact our lives and what we do. So it's so important to understand that, because we can work, and heavens, I do. I just about killed myself on Thanksgiving weekend making food for various communities where people are houseless. And we can give our money, we can have the small houses, we can do all this stuff, thinking that we're really making a difference. You know, you guys, we're just flicking little tiny things there because we haven't changed ourselves. We haven't changed our hearts fully. We're like if Scrooge would have said, "Oh yeah, I'll send the turkey to Tiny Tim's house, but I'm not going to worry about him after that." And good grief, his father has to work. You know, and you say, "Well, I was really, really generous because I sent them a turkey." Wrong answer. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's my MO in my life, and has always been. Yeah. And that's why I've been involved in the wider church ministries for a long time, and for the last since the mid 1990s, I've been involved in the PIN, Palestine-Israel Network, nationally. But the wider church ministries is a official committee of the conference, of our conference, the Central Pacific Conference. And it has tasked really with the wider church, so the world. Now, it's part of our structure. At the national level, we have the wider church ministries. It's also at the national level. And we also have, that's inside of our structure of the United Church of Christ. We also have global ministries, which is we share with the Disciples of Christ. Those are our two reaching out into the world on a national level.
Now I'm going to have to cut you short a little bit, but it relates to what you're saying. So I think a lot of us in this room hear and are holding on to what you're saying. But the question I always get after a conversation like this is, okay, what now? What do I do? Mm-hmm. Should I just go out, buy a turkey, and show up at someone's house? Here you go. So back in September, we as a conference voted for a resolution supporting peace in the Philippines and peace in Palestine. I think it would be helpful for us to know what that meant.
Right.
I also think it would be not just helpful, but urgently important for us to know how we can show up in the world right now.
Right.
You know, our hearts ache for what's happening.
Right. Well, those were actually two separate resolutions, both coming out of the Committee on the Wider Church Ministry Committee. And the one on Palestine is sort of a general one, and especially then, and it was before all of this broke loose. So now it seems kind of milquetoast-like, but it was to declare ourselves as an anti-apartheid conference.
Can I just point out how ridiculous it is that for some of us in some parts of this world around us, that is a controversial thing to vote on.
Yeah.
But at the very least, as milquetoast as it is, it means something to me that we at least did that.
Yes.
Not enough.
Yeah.
But I at least appreciate being in a conference that is overwhelmingly anti-apartheid.
Right. We understand that that's not a way to live our lives.
Yeah.
The other one, which was on the Philippines, was a very specific ask that we as a conference and as individuals support the HR 1344, which is called the Philippines Human Rights Act, which is a bill in our House of Representatives. And it's to write to your representatives to make sure that everyone you can think of knows that we are supporting that and want it to go through. Another big part is to talk to your senators, to our senators, and convince them to create a companion bill in the Senate to bring it through. So that's a very specific thing, because that asks, the bill says that we stop all money that we are giving to the Philippine military, which it probably will surprise you that we give them a lot of money for their military specifically, that we stop all money to the military until they show that they are responding to the UN's Human Rights Commission, which has given them, as named specific things that are problems and want them to stop. So it's a very concrete bill, just asking to stop our money until they are upholding the human rights that the UN is asking of them. Today, actually, you might know, is the 75th anniversary of the UN's human rights document. And I tell you, human rights are worse now than they were 75 years ago, really. So that was specific. And the other part of that's specific, which I'm excited about, is that we voted as a conference to take that same resolution to our National Synod in 2025. Now, with the UCC organizational structure, if a conference asks to have a resolution on the agenda, it's on the agenda. So we're on the agenda for 2025, but we have a lot of work to do. And that's one thing. So those are political actions. Those of you who like to write letters and stuff, just to get the word out on those, and we need to get the word out on the resolution going to the Synod to other churches and other conferences, because we can get it up there, but if people show up at Synod and haven't heard of it before, it's not likely to get passed.
Right.
So we have a lot of work to do in the next 2 years for that. But that's, it's not only from our conference, you know, the United Church of Christ nationally, and our international presence is bigger than you might think. When I first became involved in the Philippines interfaith group, which I'm part of, it's a fairly small group. We're sitting there, and then I see, well, there are 9 faith groups throughout the world who have sanctioned this thing, who are members of that network. The top 2 are our National Church, Wider Church Ministries Committee and our Global Ministries. given as two different things. So we're there. We're ready to go, but our leaders might be there, but our hearts need to be changed. And to answer just quickly, it's, you start a pastor talking and she can't shut her up. But
I know the struggle.
what can we do? I truly believe, because I've seen it happen, that when we as individuals or communities really open our hearts and study the history and talk about it and get over our anger that the story is problematic for us, the Spirit tells us what to do. When we think, what are we going to do, what are we going to do, before we've done the work, we have to do the work. Like Scrooge had to do the work. He had to go through those horrible dreams to know what to do. We have to do the same thing. We have to do the work. So I encourage study groups, work groups. I encourage individuals, or 2 or 3, to really look at the different histories, different news stories. There's a lot of stuff out there. And I'll just put a little plug in. If you don't know where to find it, look on my Facebook page, which covers Palestine and the Philippines extensively. And not from the news that you get. Those are from the people who live on the streets, writing what's happening in Palestine and the Philippines. So we have to do the work. We can't, and it's hubris. It's absolute hubris to think that we can decide what our reaction is going to be before we've done the work. That is not only you're not doing the work. It's not only lazy, it is intentionally not letting your gut be hit by the truth.
So I had this really, really bad day in ministry a couple of years ago. I was at Sherry's with a congregant, and I was leading some different studies, and I'm as much a student as everybody else who's participating. It doesn't matter that I have a title of reverend, I'm still learning. Sometimes I have much more to learn because of that, I also carry some privilege. And I asked this congregant, who was a big advocate for study in our church, why don't you come to any of our studies? And she looked at me in the eyes and she said, Giuseppe, what you don't understand is I was alive during the civil rights movement, and I supported those things, as a lot of people in this church have. And so what you don't get is that we already know what we need to know. We already get it, so we don't really need to go to the classes. I wanted to quit that day. That was a really hard day for me. Because if we have nothing left to learn, I don't think we get to grow anymore as people. I think we start atrophying once we reach this point of, I got it all figured out. And I think that goes in so many different areas of our lives. Now, I think a question that I would have is, all right, so we've done the study. We've read the 1619 Project. We've studied up on the Philippines. We've studied up on Palestine. We looked at the regions offered racial reckoning resources. What do we do then? How do we know that the Spirit is leading us in a direction?
Well, if you have honestly done the study, you will have been hit in the gut many times. And if you have gone through those experiences individually or as a group, you don't have to know what you're going to do, because it will become clear to you. Because getting hit in the gut, it's the Spirit's work, right? It's the ghost work, we could say. But it's the Spirit at work, touching our hearts, but really touching our bellies and saying, something is really wrong here, and I need to figure it out. I need to know how I'm participating in it, and I need to know what to do to bring peace. And when that hits you, or you, or you, or you, or me, it doesn't. That's just part of the drops into the bucket that eventually change the world. But when we decide that we're done because we know enough or that we've done enough, then you're not putting your drop into the bucket.
Yeah.
And you're not going to change the world.
Yeah.
And it's these things didn't happen overnight, and they're not going to end overnight, but they're not going to end unless every one of us starts right now putting our drops into the bucket.
My hope is that we can start having these Bob Cratchit, Scrooge moments where maybe we don't know what to do. We brought this gift. Does it undo years of poverty, years of unfair wages, years of closing down orphanages? It doesn't. It doesn't undo that. But we can sit down, build relationship, and see how we can go further together. And that's something I think I think we're on board for that in our work around housing justice, right? A lot of what happened with We Shine is a byproduct of building relationship with folks at We Shine.
Right.
And caring about our neighbors who are dying on the streets, right? This is where our conversation's going to have to end.
All right.
But when we're all done with our congregational meeting, I don't want you to feel like you have to stick around. I believe you have a place you need to go after this, so I'm not gonna.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna
I'm
obligate
actually driving to Seattle.
Right, I'm like, Ann, you want to stick around for an hour from now? Seattle traffic will be fine.
Except for someone told me the game is at the Marin. Is ending. It'll end around 4, and so I need to get through Seattle to my friend's house before the game ends.
Yeah.
I just want to explain myself so you don't think I don't love you, because I would otherwise just stay here.
How do we reach you? If we have questions about this, we want to find a study,
right?
Resources.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm a member at Kairos, and I'm as you get involved in or just connect with the wider church ministry, they'll give you that. But I don't have any cards because I'm retired.
Yeah.
But you can call me. You can find me. This is kind of crazy. I'd never thought of this before. You can find me on Facebook. I'd gotten enough followers or something that they switched me to another category.
Oh.
And I didn't know that, and I don't know why or how or what difference it makes. But I'll tell you one thing that gives me hope right now in the situation in both Palestine and the Philippines is that since they did that, I have in the last, so I would say since the 1st of October, this is stupid, I can't even believe I'm saying it, I have gained 3,000 new followers.
Wow.
I don't know why, but people I'm a historian. I put all this stuff out there, I'm the ghost. I'm telling what happened in the past, what's happening right now.
I believe you may fall into this category of social media influencer.
I think that's what they called me.
Yeah. All right, well, hey, thank you so much.
Yeah.
If you want to get a hold of Ann, you can do so through our conferences, Wider Church Ministry. You can email them. You can find that on the website for the region. On Facebook, you can join the growing throngs. And there was one other you mentioned.
Kairos, Milwaukee.
Milwaukee.
That's my church, and of course they have and I would give you my thing, but you don't have your.
You'll
You'll know it.
We'll find you.
You'll find
We'll find you. Okay.
I'm in.